Now, there is a very, very interesting feature of this particular universe, and we know this for sure. The way the universe behaves, down to its elementary particles, changes based off whether there's an observer present. An observer changes the way matter itself behaves. A couple hundred years ago, there was a debate. People wanted to know what light was. Newton thought it was a stream of particles. He thought it was stuff, particles. And this guy named Huygens thought it was a wave. And they set up the double slit experiment. And by the end of it, it was determined that it's particles and waves, but it's either one or the other based off of whether or not there's an observer. If there's no observer, things tend to exist as potential, formless. Light exists as a wave. But if you put an observer there, suddenly it's definite. It's particles. It's in position. And this is something I like about today. Like, we have the benefit of the last couple hundred years. Like, any kind of philosophy we want to talk is hugely aided by some of the stuff that's come out over the last few hundred years. And that's just one of those things that we know now. We know that somehow reality is aware of whether or not an observer is present. And this stuff doesn't have a thought process. It doesn't consider, take a minute to mull over whether or not an observer is present. Like, it's instantaneous. You close your eyes, open your eyes. It's that quick. It collapses into a wave or shapes up into a particle. And this could be with a camera. It could be with a camera on a camera. Like, you can have 20 cameras rigged up watching particles. And whether or not that camera is on, whichever one out of the 20 is on, those particles are aware of whether or not they're being watched. And it's a weird thing too, because you notice, like, people are different too when there's an observer present. It's like, we all know that we're like totally different people when we're by ourselves. Not totally different, but we're different enough. And when somebody's there, based off our relationship with them, we're this different chemical with this person. And then if you add a camera to the situation, a camera, I don't know if you've noticed, but when somebody busts out a camera, the whole vibe changes. Some people can't stand being recorded. And you notice, if you look at old family videos or just really any time somebody breaks the camera out, you see this thing happen. There's this change. Suddenly there's this observer that doesn't have any gaps in its memory. Everything is recorded, and there's this sort of objective piece of time that's recorded. And I notice it in myself too. It's not something that's even really under our control. When two humans are doing something and they witness something, it's possible for one of those two people to persuade the other that what they saw isn't what they saw, or it's different than what they saw. But if something is recorded, there is no doubt. And that does that gives us a funny little feeling somewhere in the back of us. And these things like that, these these situations, like how particles and waves change whether or not there's an observer. These things are scalable. They apply on the quantum level, and they apply on the largest level, and they apply on the human level. And it's one of those things that's universal. It's one of those things that we just get. And that's the interesting thing, man. There's all this, and more. Yet human beings are these entities that screen out most of what's going on. Our senses, our minds, everything about us has been sharpened and finely tuned just so that we pick up the perfect amount of what we need to interpret things the way we need to interpret them. Our eyes pick up a very small band of light. Our ears pick up a very small band of sound. Our skin is a certain softness or hardness in relationship to other things, which makes it basically the 0 point. We leave out most of reality, and for good reason. If we could hear all of the sound spectrum, we would hear nothing. It would be static. If we could see all color, all light, we wouldn't be able to see anything. And there are different animals, different creatures, with all sorts of variations across the board. Different types of animals, different types of vision and hearing. And it's funny how we're all here on this same rock. But humans don't hibernate. We don't have nocturnal vision. I wish we did, that would be nice. But we don't. And then our thoughts, too. We leave out most of our brain activity. Most of what's going on is churning and churning underneath. And the bits that get into the conscious area is just a trickle. And we spend most of our lives in that state, most of our lives. I think I called that the spotlight attention. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a judgment, it's not good or not bad, it's just the way it is. And we spend so much time there that it's a relief to go to the other side, to open that up, to let more in. And if you have a camera on you all day long, if you had a camera on you 23 hours a day, you would feel a lot of relief for that 1 hour where there was no camera. Because there's something about it that pulls more out of you. You can call it acting, you could call it being your best, being on your best behavior, but something is going on there. And some say part of the reason why we started to get rid of Christianity was because this idea of this ever-present observer was something that humanity started to resent. We wanted to break loose. We wanted the other side. And of course, it's a natural tendency. Anytime we spend too much time on one side, we will start to yearn for the other. And maybe we won't know that that's what we're yearning for. It'll feel like a hole that's never filled. If we spend a lot of time alone, we might start to yearn for company. And if we spend time constantly with people, we might start to yearn some solitude. And we all know this. We all know that our entire life is a system of balances. We all know that. But sometimes this thing that so many people have talked about in the past, somehow they knew. These things that we're finding out about reality, being aware that it's being observed, somehow people knew that a long, long time ago. People were writing about it. The Taoists and the Buddhists and all those people. And even when they wrote about God in the Bible, that's another way of saying it. There's something present within the fabric of the universe that's alive and aware and knows us intimately. And we are also that at the same time. And another thing I like about being a human, I do benefit from the work of other people, from watching other people, but I've noticed as I age, everything that I've ever needed, every question that I've ever had, every bit of wisdom that I could possibly want is available. It's available here, oddly, because I, you, everybody who exists, everybody who has existed, has this chance with the same sort of reasoning, with the same sort of mind, to learn something a little more about what's going on. And I'll always mention that because I cannot get away from that as the inescapable thing that we all seem to do in one shape or one form or another. And I realize that this universe is somehow adding new information. Somehow, new information is coming about. You would figure that information would be embedded, discovered, and that would be that. But no, there's new information. Our genetic code, our DNA, is information. It's instructions on how to grow you. And to a mind like ours and a mind like God's, there is a legible set of information there. And we can tell what color eyes you have and all sorts of things about you just based off that information. But that information came from somewhere. You know, you don't find a fully written book loaded with information without people, without intelligence. Anywhere you find information, there is intelligence at play. There's either intelligence who put it there and intelligence who found out about it. Information is a whole other level. It's almost like a sense. Because the other animals of the planet definitely experience reality in a very palpable way, but information is not a sense that they're aware of. It's a uniquely human and I would say God thing. It's almost like a thing that binds us almost as much as our soul does. It's something that can be tucked into the universe, put into the universe, just for us to find. And things work out so well, so often. Just right according to the information, right according to how it should go. we write up these massive equations, and it's just a bunch of numbers, but it ends up building a giant rocket, a giant thrust. Somehow, this information can be translated. And that's the basis. That's what makes us human more than anything else. The ability to rearrange. And it started so simple. At first, we would find animals, we would get furs, maybe get some berries, grow some crops, and trade it. We would trade with people, and then we would meet with them and say, "Meet me here. We'll trade here." And then you meet them every season at that same spot. Then you tell more and more people about it. Next thing you know, there's 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 people there, all meeting in the same spot once a year. And then as time goes on, maybe you build a table out there, a couple of tables. Maybe a little spot to store some stuff so you don't have to carry it for the next season. Next thing you know, there's 100 people there, all trading their own individual um, item, whatever it may be. And then a shop suddenly springs up, a hotel, a building for administration. Suddenly, a city is forming. And if you are a tomato farmer and you're trying to trade your tomato for some beef, but the beef guy is already full on somebody else's tomatoes, you got a problem. So that's where money comes in. The representative. We were like, hey, we need something else to trade in place for stuff so that I might be able to use that for other stuff. The ability to network to that degree is a fascinating thing. And look at how complex it's gotten. Look at us now. Look where we're at. We used to trade pelts and berries and weapons at a crossroads somewhere. And that grew and grew and grew. And we found out how to harvest resources. We learned what resources were. We learned about buoyancy. We learned how to navigate oceans and deep water, blue water navies, blue water ships. And we started collecting information, keeping it and storing it and passing it down. We started to get experts. And the more we find out, I don't think we'll ever plateau because, as we all know, there's just so much about the human being that's still left unsaid and unknown. Today, we like that seal of approval, that scientific seal of approval, and for good reason. Um, you know, and you notice like anxiety today is that's a thing I hear about a lot. Anxiety is when your nervous system is just overloaded with energy and it has nowhere to go, no direction. It just stays bouncing around inside of you. Some people have nervous tics. Some people pace. Some people smoke. Some people just talk just to let it out. Some people fidget, but it's got to escape somehow. Anxiety is almost always existing within a person who has psychic energy, call it what you will, that has no direction. It's either being blocked by some exterior force or just this person doesn't know where to put it. These bursts of energy come around and just literally just bounce around inside of you, just lighting up your nervous system, and nothing else can be done while that's going on. It'll just stop you in your tracks. So in that situation, you have to find a way to let it out. Whether it's physically tapping something, tapping a table, something, you have to let it out. Because that's what's happening. And you have to organize. You have to say something, do something. You have to let that energy animate you somehow in a way that's conducive with how you feel and who you are and what you want to accomplish. If you can line those three things up, then anxiety won't be a part of your life. It just won't. It just doesn't exist in people who flow, because that's what it is. It's a sort of flow. And we can get like I said, these clusters inside of us of knots. And it has a momentum, man. It has a momentum. If you have a knot that's just way, way old, it's been there for years and years and years. That first knot is it's changed your path. It's changed what you otherwise would have said and done in thousands of different situations. It's altered your trajectory. It's given you a new momentum, or at least contributed to it in some way, which leads to another knot, a larger knot, that often references the first knot to justify its existence, which will lead to another one. And by the time you get to the third one, you're defining yourself now. Now you're saying this is who you are. The way you speak and your language starts to reflect these areas, these psychic spots that are just completely tied up. And sometimes they can form a gravity, and they can pull energy into them and just have a detrimental impact on how you just flow as a person. Every part of us. And it can keep going and going and going until there's so many knots and so many different areas. It just fragments you and makes you feel like you don't know who you are or what you are or why you're here or what you're doing. You don't know what to say, what to do, how to be. So this stuff has to it has to be taken care of immediately. And it's hard to specify exactly what that sort of thing is, because each person has different things that tie them up. I used to be shy. I was a shy kid. And it bothered me a little bit, you know. When I was a kid, I used to think that it would be better if I wasn't shy, you know. And I just sort of accepted it. That's how it was, you know. And eventually, without my knowing it, I started getting into sports. And I ended up becoming really good at basketball. And by the time I finished playing basketball, a couple of years of that, I wasn't shy anymore. I had something that pulled on the other end that just exploded animation out of me and just completely just knocked out whatever I perceived as something that needed change. And I never played basketball to change anything. I played basketball because I loved it. Sometimes it seems like the things that we love, the things that draw our interest, are almost calling to us to give us a route. And it's so easy to recognize that you are into this or that and go in a different direction. It's like that crisis, that sort of situation people talk about often, where it's like if you're going to do a job, if you're going to work and get paid, you should do something you love. It's like people have this tendency to want to tie getting paid to doing what you love. And there's something about that. There's something about knowing you're at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing with the right people. You know there's not anywhere else that you're supposed to be. But this thing that I've tried to talk about, this thing that many people have talked about, is something that unknots, not only unknots a human being, but it almost pushes the reset button. It just sort of wipes the slate clean without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. All those knots, all that neuroses and anxiety and things that we perceive as wrong with us are very directly tethered to the subjective aspect of our lives. The part of our lives that wouldn't exist if we didn't exist. So the remedy is the objective world. A life lived deep, deep in the roots of the subjective is a roller coaster because you're very attached to a lot of things, and a lot of things seem very serious. A lot of things seem make or break. They all seem like so much hinges on so much. It's the world where words affect you more. The thoughts and opinions of other people affect you more. Your opinion of yourself affects you more. Your position in your life, in contrast to where you want to be, affects you more. So the objective is going to be something that is going to call. It's what makes people go out to the mountains in India for 10 years and try to get a little taste of it. But I have come to that conclusion. I really feel that at some point, I think that's what a midlife crisis is. I think that's why sometimes people end up in these situations where they just need some kind of change. Because all of a sudden it just seems like they're not where they want to be. They're moving in the wrong direction. The etching, the thing that we are etching now. I am etching this. I am sitting here talking. And even me, my thoughts and the things that I think about on a day-to-day basis, like, obviously when I press record on this, something changes. I wouldn't be talking like this without the record button pressed, obviously. The observer is in all of us. All of us, the thing that we all have in common, the thing that is identical in every person, is the way, way, way deep down, objective little observer that sees everything all the time. It is the essence, it's the spark, it's the thing that not only we all share, but we share with everything else. It is the animating force. And that thing is beaming. It radiates. It's a beaming thing laced all through and within us. And our specific identities, our personalities are sort of draped over it and around it. And it's the thing that knows. It's the thing that knows when we don't know. That somehow seems to sometimes inform us. Socrates used to call it a daemon, and he said he would always listen to it. He said it was almost like a voice, and anytime he was in a situation, he would say, "What should I do?" and he would listen to it. And all it is this objective spot that guides without the subjective influence, while being aware of the subjective influence. It's the deepest reaches of wisdoms we could ever possibly reach. But there are some people are different though. That's the thing. Not everybody's wise. And not every wise person is worth listening to be honest. And that's part of the trap of that whole thing. Like, say you get enlightened, and you go on this whole trip, and you get a really good glimpse of what you are and what this world is, what reality is. You truly do. You see it. At that point, you're going to have a hell of a time avoiding playing the role of the sage, because that's going to be your first tendency, is to want to come back and show how wise you are. It's part of the trap. It's almost like a test of wisdom itself. It's like when you see something like that, does it become just another thing that defines you, that you can show other people, that you can have yet another element of the world that you feel good in explaining to people? Alan Watts used to talk about this. Jim Carrey is a really good example of what I'm talking about. Jim Carrey clearly saw what there is to see, without a doubt, but Jim's an example of a guy who went out and never came back. He is still in the objective and the abstract. He's still way out there, disassembled, which is why he says some of the things that he says. You can see what he's trying to say, but he hasn't come back. When you see something like that, you have to come back. You have to go back into who you were, the subjective, your personality, your core, and let those things that you see in the objective world blend together in a sort of balance.